Well, the third Republican presidential debate is over. You are here with us. We thank you for trusting us to give you a kind of a breakdown. We're going to spend the next hour doing that. I will describe for you in brief what occurred in the 2 hours of the Republican presidential debate, and please don't mistake brevity for glibness. So, inflation, bad. Border, close it. Israel, whatever it takes. Ukraine, maybe, maybe not. TikTok, banned. Then a conversation about how many ships in the U.S. Navy going forward, Venezuela, fentanyl, and then very, very late in this evening's proceedings, a conversation about abortion and a lot of back and forth about what the Republican Party ought or ought not to do on that particular issue. And then, as you might have heard in that opening, some sentiments expressed about what just happened. The elections held yesterday. A couple of Republicans on the stage said the Republican Party is losing far more than it ought to. Here is a summary of some of the things said tonight on stage. Let's listen.
If you look where we are now, it's a lot different than we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance.
These problems are so big and serious that the first thing I would say to Prime Minister Netanyahu is pretty simple. America is here, no matter what it is you need at any time to preserve the state of Israel.
Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
I wear heels. They're not for a fashion statement. They're for ammunition. I'm telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to see
The fact of the matter is she doesn't answer
So this
the
is what
question.
I will...
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my
before
daughter
preaching
out
to
of your
anybody else, your
voice.
adult daughter. The next generation of Americans.
What we should do is ban TikTok, period. Now, we saw under former President Trump, he tried to ban TikTok twice, but was struck down by our federal courts. If you cannot ban TikTok, you should eliminate the Chinese presence on the app.
We should be arming Taiwan. Make sure they have the equipment they need. Make sure they have the training they need now. There's nothing China fears more than knowing that America will have Taiwan's back.
I'm going to unleash all of America's energy potential. On day one, I'm taking all the Biden regulations, the Green New Deal, ripping it up and throwing it in the trash can where it belongs.
We are already overtaxed in this country, and we should not raise those taxes.
I think we can get to 3, 4, maybe even 5% GDP growth if we really take the regulatory shackles off of our economy. And against that backdrop, I believe this is our last best window to be able to take care of our national debt problem through those severe measures, including sacrificing the foreign wars that many bloodthirsty members of both parties have a hunger for.
Let me just say to my mama and to every other mama or grandfather receiving Social Security, as President of the United States, I will protect your Social Security.
Not pictured former President Trump. And we have learned through our colleague Ed O'Keefe that former President Trump's not going to participate in the fourth debate either. More on that in a little bit. You just saw him a moment ago. Let's bring him back. Robert Costa, who is our chief elections and campaign correspondent. He joins us now. Robert, your instant summary of the evening's events.
Major, great to be with you from here inside the spin room in Miami, Florida. It was a heated debate night here in Miami. It was clear that so many of these contenders on stage are searching for some way, any way, to become a viable, credible alternative to the front runner in this race, former President Donald Trump. And it's not easy. There were skirmishes at times about policy, especially on Israel and at abortion, as you mentioned, at the end. But ultimately, this was not a night about Trump. He loomed over this debate as a shadow just down the road holding his rally, but he didn't fixate the interest of those on stage. They're still making their appeals to the donors, to the voters on their own terms, not exactly trying at this point to barrel through Trump.
And Robert, to that point, which I think exactly encapsulates the evening, yes, it was spirited at times. It had some interesting jousting on policy and some politics. But still, without the former president there, it is not a direct engagement. And therefore, it seems to me, and I wonder if this is your impression and those in the spin room, that though they engage with one another, without Trump, it's hard to make that big next leap.
It is certainly going to be difficult. I've traveled the country alongside you over the past year tracking this primary campaign. And Major, I just think days ago, I was sitting in New York City in a courtroom watching a former president testify about allegedly committing fraud against the state of New York. That, in any other circumstance of a presidential race, would be a dominant topic. Yet it kind of was mentioned in a roundabout way here a few times, his legal challenges, but otherwise was disregarded by those on stage. And former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, perhaps the most pointed against Trump. But it's evident to me as a reporter that the tension in this race right now is, yes, Vivek Ramaswamy is taking everybody on, but it's really about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former Ambassador Nikki Haley as they pitch traditional Republicans to be their standard bearer.
And in that context, Robert, how important does the DeSantis campaign believe the endorsement from Iowa's very popular Republican governor, Kim Reynolds, is this week and will be in every week between now and the Iowa caucuses?
They believe it's very important, but as we've always discussed, Major, sitting next to each other at CBS, Kim Reynolds, any Iowa governor, it gives you some political capital, but it's not everything. Iowa's Republican Party is not just a party, it's a series of activists and community groups and church leaders who end up coming up to a consensus at times about who's going to be their favorite. I think about the late break toward Mike Huckabee in 2008, the late break toward Rick Santorum in 2012 or Ted Cruz in 2016. And what we're seeing now is a bit of a start of a late break toward Governor DeSantis. But what the DeSantis campaign is watching, and so is the Trump campaign, and so is the Christie campaign, to be sure, is New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who has not made an endorsement yet. And he likely, I'm told by sources close to him, is going to come down to Ambassador Haley or Governor DeSantis. He is friendly, though, with Governor Christie. I spoke with the governor when he came by CBS this week. He said he still hasn't made a decision, but he wants somebody who's able to beat Trump long term as this nomination fight unfolds.
Robert Costa with us in the spin room in Miami. Thank you so very much. Well, I've got some anchor buddies here. That's what we call them in the biz. I want to bring them on our political panel. That's the other formal name. Ashley Etienne and Devin O'Malley. You can see them on screen now. Ashley, CBS News political contributor, former communications director for Vice President Kamala Harris and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Devin is the managing director for narrative strategies and an advisor to former Vice President Mike Pence, who recently dropped out of this race. That's why we didn't see him on the debate stage tonight. Devin, your impressions as someone who was advising a candidate who was in this race, recently on the debate stage. Any takeaways from you on this evening just concluded?
Well, I think we saw another debate that didn't really move the needle at the end in the big race. But ultimately here, we always viewed the campaign as a race to take on Donald Trump. And so to that extent, I think that DeSantis and Haley landed a number of blows on one another. I think that Vivek Ramaswamy needed to come out as likable because he hasn't done that in any debate yet, and I'm not sure he even came close to that mark. Senator Tim Scott needed to land a major blow and to have a breakout moment, and he just didn't quite do it at times. And we saw a different Chris Christie, I think, than we've seen in the past, and much less bombast and a much more sober, kind of judicious type of candidate. But again, I don't think anything moves the needle in terms of taking on Trump right now. But I think in the short term, the race to take on Trump, I think that Haley and DeSantis made a little bit of progress on one another.
Devin, you know from bitter experience that fundraising is the lifeblood of a sustainable presidential campaign. There is a conversation going on among Republican donors right now. Where to put your money? Do you keep investing in DeSantis or do you move over to Haley? And I've talked to some donors who've already made the transition. There are lots of phone calls going on. Hey, look, if you haven't given, give to her now. Now's the time to back Haley. Do you think anything happened tonight to change those conversations or those allocations?
I think the conversations that were happening before the debate will continue to happen. I think Nikki didn't backslide at all, right? I think she continued to show that she has foreign policy credentials. I would have liked to see a little bit more out of her on the domestic side, but she continued to show that she's a formidable candidate. She's not going to back down. She was impressive on stage. She hit back a very cheap attack from Vivek Ramaswamy when he brought up his adult daughter, which was totally bizarre. She's a tough candidate, and I think she showed a really stiff spine, and I think that donors are looking for that in a candidate who might eventually have to take on Donald Trump head-to-head.
Ashley,
Yeah.
your impressions?
I don't think, I mean, I agree that I don't think the needle was moved very far. I don't think anyone walked away with any different impression of any of the candidates than when they went in. I think what I was struck by, I think Nikki Haley met the moment. And she has consistently met the moment. She looked prepared. She had attack lines for everyone. I mean, she didn't let anyone slide or move. Like, nothing went unanswered when it came to her. She got, overwhelming response from the audience, from everything from foreign policy to even her answer on abortion. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think she really proved herself to be very presidential. But I will say this, DeSantis totally disappeared on stage. I almost forgot he was even there. I mean, the entire time. So I don't know that I would put my money on him at all. I think if I'm a Republican donor, I'm betting on Nikki Haley. She performed very well and
one of the things that
fearless.
Nikki Haley and those around her like to say about her campaign is it is the most threatening to President Biden if he's the Democratic nominee, as all Democrats expect that he will be, at least currently. Do you think that's true? Do you think Nikki Haley represents a tougher challenge if she became the Republican nominee than, let's say, former President Trump would?
Absolutely, no doubt. I think if she wins, it becomes a totally different game. It's a different ball game. We have to recalibrate on a lot of different fronts. So I think it definitely would be a tough, hard race. But here's the thing, she can't run away from Trump. So I think the Democratic Party would hold her accountable for his record. President Biden, strong footing, again, 4 cycles he's been winning, great record, bipartisan record. Many of the things that she can't say that would contrast well with her, but I definitely think it would be a tough race.
Devin, very quickly, do you think Nikki Haley has a chance, and I mean a real chance, to become the Republican nominee?
I do. I think the air of inevitability has increased and continues to increase around Donald Trump, but a lot remains to be seen with his legal challenges in the spring, and I still think that there is a candidate that could emerge, and I think that Nikki's positioned herself well to be that candidate.
Here's the other thing. In politics, all that matters is the trend line. Mm-hmm. Her trend is going up in terms of polling, fundraising, so she's in a strong position.
Control room was telling me ever so politely I need to say thank you, at least for the time being. Ashley Etienne, Devin O'Malley, thank you very much.